one of the, I think, most compelling hypotheses is that just drinking more coffee might make you more physically active because it's a stimulant.
100%,
You have more
100%.
brain energy. So if you're having 4 to 6 cups of coffee per day, maybe you're more motivated to exercise, you're more physically active throughout the day. Boom, that explains the frailty, it explains the cardiovascular disease, it explains a lot of these health benefits.
Welcome to Fuel In Sessions, the podcast that delves into the science of nutrition. Powered by Fuel In, the AI nutrition app that makes nutrition simple, personalized, and adaptive for anyone who exercises and wants to improve their health and their performance. We will share expert insights, training tips, strategies, and hopefully some laughs so you can fuel your best and reach your full potential. I am your host, Scott Tindal, and today I am joined by a regular guest, Brady Holmer. Brady, welcome back.
Scott, thanks for having me back.
Mate, looking forward to this one. The reason I get you back on is because I really like the sort of quick fire, reviews we do of some interesting papers that either you've sent me or I've sent you. And, it's not to bamboozle people with science. It's probably more to try and give them some key takeaways, hopefully get them to then go and read the study or at least have a think about what we've discussed and then think about how that applies to their life and what they're doing from a nutritional or training perspective. So, mate, before we get into it, how things been?
Things have been good other than, you and I were just chatting offline about my current injury situation. Unfortunately, I was training for a marathon that's about 2 weeks from now and have a little foot injury. Not quite sure what it is, but probably going to take me out of that marathon and cause me to shift goals a little bit down the road. So it's a little bit unfortunate, but other than that, I can't complain. Life is pretty good, and I can still ride my bike and walk without pain and strength train. So, we'll get fit in different ways for maybe a month or two.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate to hear. I mean, I follow your Substack and your road to sub 220 marathon, which, we were chatting about this, and I know you have your ideas around training volume and training intensity, and we discussed that. And I probably said, well, I can directly quote myself, is that I probably find it hard to dissociate myself from the nutrition aspect because that's obviously the world I live in. And you obviously, then said, yeah, there probably is a part there. And I think the unfortunate thing is that we just don't know what you've been eating. Haven't had you on Fuel In and need to get you on Fuel In. And maybe this will be the catalyst where we start to look at your nutritional intake and then align it to your what your training volume and your training intensity is. And I think, we just recently we talked about the new Fuel In 2.0 algo and putting in things like run thresholds and bike FTP and personas and all that. And I think, you're the perfect candidate for us to line up and get you sorted. So looking forward to that.
Yeah, I think so. I think that could be something new to integrate into the training plan as I go forward. For me, it's having this not being kind of my first bone stress related injury. I've analyzed nutrition and kind of thought about it a lot in the past because I think a lot of this stuff does come down to nutrition, energy availability. So it's always been a goal of mine to optimize nutrition. But as you mentioned, if you're not really tracking, you can't really be sure of whether you're eating enough, whether you're eating the right things. I mean, interestingly for me, not to get off track too much, but a lot of people will just say use their weight as a metric to say, am I eating enough or not? Historically, for me, that has been a terrible proxy of whether I'm eating enough or not. And I think that with a lot of athletes who kind of have optimized their weight and body composition, you may not see a lot of weight changes with, if your calorie intake is up or down. You're just going to kind of see a reduction in energy going to other processes in your body, which for me, maybe it's, the bone stuff. So I'm not going to lose weight if I'm eating too little. It may just reflect in other areas like my hormone health. And so, one of the reasons why I haven't really relied on weight as a predictor of whether I'm eating enough, but tracking is something I've gotten into a little bit more recently, and I think, I'd love to try out Fuel and see if it can help me in that respect.
Yeah, maybe if you are open to it, and again, this is on the fly, but maybe when you do get the results, and then we discussed about some certain blood tests, and other markers, maybe we do discuss that and look at, from the historical aspect of your training and nutrition, and then what that looks like, and then how we would actually implement that moving forward so we can get you that sub 220.
Yeah, it'd be a fun case study.
I think so. I think so. Well, mate, that's actually a great segue. And I'll just flip the order a little bit here of the studies we're going to talk about. And just so everyone knows, the studies we are going to talk about today, we're going to talk a little bit about large language models and the accuracy of food photography. We're also going to talk about caffeine, drinking it and seeing whether it makes you less old, but then also talking about caffeine and performance under ketogenic and high carb situations. And then finally, we're going to get into a little bit of concurrent versus aerobic training for body comp changes. And I think that's a really good one for off season. A lot of people will be interested in that. So let's kick off then with the food evaluation of 3 large language models for nutritional content estimation from food images. This one caught my eye, and obviously it caught my eye because we're in the business at Fuel In of estimating nutritional intake. And I think, we get a lot of requests from individuals saying, why don't you have food photography? And of course, everyone knows best that food photography is the latest thing and everyone should be using it because it's so cool. And we have seen some competitors, so Fuel In and other apps, integrate food photography and making pretty wild claims around it, I think, when I see those claims about the accuracy. So this study wanted to compare ChatGPT-4, Claude 3.5 Sonnet, and Gemini 1.5 Pro. And what it wanted to do was estimate nutritional content, including the weight of the food, the energy content of the food, the macronutrient composition, and this was from standardized food photographs, which, is what we're seeing in a lot of these apps today. It included 52 total photos that we used, and 16 were food components and 36 were complete meals. What's your experience with food photography and nutritional estimation? Have you played around with it at all?
I have played around a little bit because recently I've been testing. I have a friend who's kind of developing an app. It's different than, say, what Fuel In would be because it doesn't necessarily integrate the physical activity type stuff or create a plan, but it's basically kind of like a food logging app. It's called Alma, just to give it a quick plug. Don't think they're a competitor of yours, but I've been using that app, testing
I know
it.
Alma. Dan Churchill.
Testing it for Dan for a little bit, and that uses food photography, and I've been using that, finding it pretty interesting. And again, I haven't compared the accuracy of it to, say, weighing it and looking at the caloric value of foods, but for me, I like it because, as we'll probably discuss, why athletes want this. It's kind of easy. I mean, I've tried tracking in the past, again, like we mentioned, to see if I'm eating enough, but it just takes so much damn time. Anybody who's done it, I'm just not willing to weigh my food and portion out things. And I'm not a bodybuilder. I'm not trying to, get down to 2% body fat for stage ready competition. So it just takes so much time if you really want to, if you're eating whole foods, not packaged foods, to scan stuff and weigh stuff. So I have used the food photography in that app, and I found it to be pretty, like, somewhat accurate because I have kind of compared it against, the packaging of stuff or like the known caloric values plus or minus a few percent of the foods. So some that's kind of my recent experience with it, but other than that, not too much experience in terms of testing it. Haven't used ChatGPT or anything like that for it, but have been using Alma and finding the experience pleasant, at least.
Mate, we need to get you definitely tracking with Fuel In, using the Smart Meals feature, which you just hit coach recommendations and it gives you 3 recommendations based exactly on the macros. And then you go and obviously cook it or eat it or prepare it. That's super simple. And then the other way, which I think we've done it better than most, is that you can just literally talk to it. So you don't have to type in, you just say in whole sentence what you're eating. If it's 2 boiled eggs, slice of whole wheat toast with a tablespoon of butter and 200 grams of cooked chicken, it will just do it for you. So again, we've definitely got to get you on it and get you trying that and just learn how easy it is. So I think, yes, the point being, and what you're highlighting there, is that the ease of food photography is a definite bonus. And we're all about making life easier for the athlete. And what this found was, so what they did was they compared the direct weighing of these actual photographs and the complete meals and the food components. They did direct weighing and nutritional database analysis and then compared it to what ChatGPT, Claude, and Gemini were showing. So what they came in with was that Claude and ChatGPT demonstrated similar accuracy in terms of mean absolute percentage error. For mean weight, they were nearly 40% under. And for energy estimation, 36% under. So let's call it closer to 40%. Now, that is huge.
Oh, that's huge. Yeah. I mean, 30,
Huge.
almost 40% if you're eating a meal that's,
Let's call it 30%.
a
Yeah.
thousand calories. So that means it could either have 700 calories or 1,300 calories, you know?
Yeah. So, well, it was always under. It wasn't even over.
Oh, it was.
It was always
always
under.
Okay.
So, yeah, in your case, 1,000-calorie meal, not unheard of. It's pretty easy to do. You're thinking you're taking in 1,000 calories and you're having 3 meals a day, 3,000 calories. Actually, you're taking in close to 4,000 calories. That's huge. Now, the scary thing is Gemini showed substantially higher errors across all nutrients. So it made like pretty huge estimations of somewhere between 64 and 110% error, which is
Do you know
massive.
if they looked at, so they say all nutrients, do you know if they looked at specific nutrients in here? So like vitamins, minerals and things, or did they just do caloric content and weight?
No, they looked at food, weight, energy, content. Oh, they did look at and then the macronutrient composition. They didn't
Oh,
look at the
macros. Okay.
micronutrient.
I see.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
see.
yeah.
So protein, fat, carbs.
Correct. And then they looked at I won't get into the nitty gritty about correlations and that because most people will probably be bored.
Yep.
The overarching sort of takeaway is that all models exhibited systematic underestimation that increased with portion size as well. So as the meals got bigger, and think America,
Yeah.
big portions, 30% or more underestimation of the value based on the food photography, that's not good.
No, and I'm reading some of these values here from that table, and so for some of them, I mean, for protein, Gemini, the average percentage error was 110%. So I mean, it's doubling or underestimating half of like protein content of a meal.
Yeah.
Carbohydrates similar, like 75% for some of these models. I mean, that's crazy. But yeah, going back to the portion sizes, I think it's not if you look at one of the images that they used in the paper, it's like this small tiny plate with a chicken breast and maybe a cup of rice and some broccoli. That seems like it would be pretty easy to estimate, right? But I mean, imagine if you have I don't know if are aware of like what sweet green is or Chipotle. I
Yeah.
mean, if you go there and take a picture of one of those enormous bowls, I figure there's no way that ChatGPT is going to be able to know because there's things underneath it. You don't really know how much chicken is on there. It could be a couple cups.
Correct.
So unless you have a plate that is perfectly divided, like the My Food plate or something like that, or you present it in a way that the model could actually like get a good image of, then it seems to make sense that yeah, the larger the portions, the more things are together. It's not going to be able
Well,
to accurately estimate that.
and that's always been my thing and our thing is like, well, yeah, it can see the top. It can't see underneath. And
What's
like,
underneath, right?
I'm always like, that's complete guesswork. And so your point about like sweet green or Chipotle. So our smart meal feature actually has like an option to choose where you're eating. So
Oh, awesome.
you could say Chipotle beef burrito bowl extra large with extra broccoli. And because those values are online, actually that's how ChatGPT or AI or these large language models can then use that information and provide you with a much more accurate like nutritional readout. And that's what we're going down. We're much more like based on what we've seen, and we've had Monash Uni and Dr. Alan McCubbin and one of his students actually now compare to a nutritional database on what we're doing. And yes, there's still some measurement error, but it's much smaller than this. Like we're talking I think it's down to 5%, between 5 and 10% error, which I'll take that any day.
For sure, for
It's a
sure.
little bit more effort in that you've got to speak into the phone and say, Chipotle beef burrito bowl extra large. However, I would say those extra few seconds, if it means that you're not getting an extra 300 calories, I'd say it's worth it, especially if you have a body composition goal in mind.
Right. And I mean, the fact that it's drawing from a nutrition database available online is obviously super helpful because any restaurant now has their food nutrition information available online. But that also brings up another, reason for me why there's probably this huge underestimation of calories. It's just because if you're making something on your own or if you're eating something out and taking a picture of it and putting it into ChatGPT, as the portion size increases, so are what the picture's not getting is the oils and things that are in foods, which I mean that's a major source of most of the calories. If I eat a Chipotle bowl, it's not just rice and chicken and vegetables. It is the, unfortunately, likely canola or some sort of vegetable oil that those are cooked in. That could be another 400 or 500 calories. And as you eat more of it, you're getting more of those oils. You're getting more of the butter or whatever it is. And you can't see that in a picture. So the model's not going to
Sure.
account for that. But,
And
but
then
as
add
you
into
mentioned,
that the sugar as well, that a
the
lot of these,
sugars, yes,
look,
added sugar and sauces,
and
anything like
this,
that.
and that takes you, I know we're going a little bit off track off the actual paper, but it's all relevant and practical takeaways is ultimately what you said there. If you are eating out all the time, no matter what you think you're eating, you have no real idea. Even with online databases of what a company says their
Hmm.
food contains, I believe they're allowed an error of at least 30% in their macronutrient nutritional information panels. Same with supplement companies,
Hmm.
and these food packaging companies. I think they're allowed up to 50% like leeway in terms of accuracy. So the big practical takeaway here is if you really are serious about your health, serious about improving body composition, you got to get in the kitchen.
I think so.
You
Cook your own meals. Know what's in there.
100% you got to cook your own meals and learn to fall in love with food again and cooking. And yeah, I'll go back. Like if you want inspiration, okay, just hit the button. Get 3 meals that maybe give you some inspiration to cook based on what you've got in the fridge. Happy days.
Yeah. And that's
And
not to say that
yeah,
nobody should eat out. Eating out is
I was
fine,
about
but
to
if you're
say
doing it,
that.
and it depends on your goals too. Maybe you're an athlete. Maybe you're somebody who's not really concerned. Like, okay, an extra 300 400 calories, that's fine. But yes, if you're really trying to be strict and it's like, well, I'm, gaining weight or I don't know why. Well, it's probably because yeah, you're eating all your food out, and if you're trying to track calories, it's just not accurate. You're also, you're relying on the person who's preparing that meal to prepare it according to the specifications by the company, and that's not happening. I mean, somebody
Not
could
if
if
you're on
somebody's
not if you're on minimum wage and you really don't care.
right. I mean, if somebody's cooking your steak, if you go to an Outback Steakhouse, they could add a tablespoon of butter or they could add 3 tablespoons of butter. Well, that's a huge difference, and it's just kind of on their discretion. And it's not to put the fault on them. It's just that's what happens when you're cooking. They're not following a system. In that
and
essence, something like McDonald's may honestly be better. That's cookie cutter kind of factory.
it's
What
so
you're getting.
standardized. It's
Yeah, it is
most
so
likely
standardized
so
that it's pretty reliable.
standardized. Correct. And I think you made a really good point there as well. You talked about the difference there. And this is something again we're building into this to the 2.0 algorithm. It's like, what is your persona? Are you recreational? Or are you trained? And someone who's just getting into exercise maybe follows a plan or doesn't even follow a plan and just wants to actually improve body composition, improve their health. Okay, for those people, eating out all the time is going to matter. But then you made the point about, you know, it's you or maybe someone like Lionel Sanders or,
Mhm.
these guys who we've seen have bone stress injuries in the past. And maybe, Lionel's probably not a great example because he does eat pretty terribly from what I've seen. But that notion of eating clean, what I've discussed with Jan at length as well, that eating clean can also be detrimental, especially if it comes at the cost of actually taking in enough calories to support your energy expenditure and what you require. So, in that sense, eating out, if you are a professional athlete or someone who's training high volume, high intensity, high load as a result, some of these options could be really great, like Sweet Green and Chipotle and that. And as long as you know you're getting in, an amount of calories that's hopefully within the limit of say 10% side to side difference, you're probably going to be okay.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I agree. Sometimes, yeah, if your caloric burn is so high, you can't sometimes get that just through chicken and rice and broccoli. You need a little bit more.
Yeah. And so look, the big takeaway from this is actually what ChatGPT and Claude showed was actually similar accuracy to traditional self-reported dietary assessment methods. So i.e. dietary recall, writing it down. The point being is that we know those methods, historically, people will underreport what they're eating, and probably overreport in terms of exercise if we're actually looking at that as well. So they're much easier. Food photography is great. We accept and acknowledge the reduced burden on an athlete.
Mm.
I think what we've just got to look at, and therefore it could potentially be a really good method if we took away like the estimation of energy. It could be useful for a practitioner to see what an athlete is eating on a day-to-day basis. Again, take those two athletes, subtypes we talked about there, the recreational, the person who's just trying to get healthier versus the elite. Okay, we start seeing that every food photo, they've got burgers, they've got fries, and they're eating out every day. Okay, well, there's a lot of useful information in those photographs now. Hey, let's get you eating at home. Let's get you eating more serves of fresh vegetables and some fresh fruit, good quality proteins. That's probably the starting place. However, if they're relying on those food photographs to accurately track their nutrition, I would have serious doubts about that at this point in time.
Yeah, I think I would agree there as well. It just doesn't seem to be probably as accurate as athletes, anybody trying to dial in their nutrition might need it to be. And then one more thought on that. I know, again, not necessarily related to this study, but where I see the application is like we got to start using food photography for this nutritional epidemiology, just in terms of, all these observational studies that say, oh, eating meat is associated with cancer, or, take any nutrient, take any food and its association with a health outcome. We need to ditch these 24-hour food recalls. We need to ditch these food frequency questionnaires and just have people take a picture of your photo for the study. Researchers are going to know exactly what they're eating, and then the researchers can estimate based on those photos what they're eating. It's just, I was thinking about this earlier, even before you and I started talking about this, but thinking about this earlier today because just the inaccuracy of, like, people don't know. If you ask somebody what they ate every day for the past week, most people don't know what they had for breakfast the other day or the portions of it. So I think if research is going to advance in this area, that might be an area where food photography is helpful in terms of let's reliably get an idea of what people are eating and then track these health outcomes and actually maybe improve nutritional epidemiology to some extent. Because I think right now, most people would agree it's the conclusions that we get from it are just sometimes they're fun, but I don't really put a lot of stock in them at all.
Yeah, and that's going to lead into the next one actually, which is interesting.
Yeah, it does.
Related to coffee. Your point being there, I think, is great, and it's actually what I think we're getting a lot of people reaching out to us at Fuel In even at the moment because, like, yeah, we were actually talking to a very large company about this. Is like we have like millions of data points now on people what they're actually eating every day, but not just eating, how it relates to exercise. And that's crazy cool. Like now
That
we
is
can start
cool.
looking into that, and we don't track fiber and micronutrient density at the moment. We will. However, we could retro-analyze, and that's what Monash Uni's done with this student of actually looking at things like fiber content and diet quality within it. Like you're exactly right. Now researchers can use those food logs, and it's not a food photography, so hopefully the accuracy is even better, like it's within 10%. We can accurately look at what someone was actually eating, time stamped as well. Like we know, was it breakfast? Was it a mid-morning snack? Was it lunch? Was it afternoon? Was it dinner? And then start to look at what that means with these correlations. And, the correlations, if they get strong enough, they suddenly become causations, don't they? So,
Yeah, no, that's super cool. I think you all need to explore that. You could get some cool publications out of that for sure.
I think so. I think there's like, yeah, we were chatting internally, Megan, myself, and Alan, and I think there is so much potential for research to come out of the data that we're now collecting, which I think will benefit everyone. So it's
I think so
very
too,
cool.
especially with the timestamps, because what people are eating is one interesting thing, but as you know, with athletes, like when you eat things surrounding exercise, the time frame in relation to exercise, important as well.
Yeah. Well, actually, I'll just segue there. I mean, I know I've mentioned this before, but the study, as a result of Jan and I talking about carb loading before injuries, the study in over on the East Coast at Maryland is actually happening. So we're working with lower limb fracture clinic
Hmm.
and looking at carb loading before they go in for surgery on the lower limb. And
Wow.
it's actually, so they've done the clearance. So they were looking at gastric emptying. They've done that, safety studies. That's all going ahead. The first part has passed, and it's using, I put Morton and Precision Hydration in touch with them. We're using those two products. I mean, it's super cool. And I
That's
mean,
cool.
so they're going to use Fuel In, then to track the consumption of these carb products prior, make sure we get them up to the high level. We probably won't get them to a full carb load initially, just a bit difficult. And there'll be limitations just because of total size of the individual. If someone's 250 pounds, we pretty hard to get 8 grams or more of carbs into them with a safety level going into surgery the next day.
Hmm.
But so there's going to be some limitations, but I think as a proof of concept, it could be amazing. And the point being is someone listened to this podcast and reached out to me, and shout out to Nathan to say, oh my God, like we thought about this. I think this could work. And much the same way what we've discussed now, like if there are, MSc students or PhD students who want to look at data analysis and start looking at some cool stuff in relation to exercise and weight loss, weight gain, weight maintenance, dietary quality, dietary quantity intake. I think there's heaps there, and we definitely welcome it at Fuel.
That's awesome. That's exciting.
Yeah, mate. So since we're going to talk about dietary recall, let's. This is a quick one. It's not a big study in terms of what it might mean to, I guess, exercising individuals, but it relates to older life, and everyone is so interested in health span and longevity these days that I thought it was just a cool one to cover. So the title is Habitual Coffee Consumption and Risk of Frailty in Later Life. So this one caught my attention because I was like, oh, I drink a lot of coffee. Do you drink a lot of coffee?
I wouldn't say a lot. Well, a couple cups a day.
Okay. Oh, yeah. I don't know. If I have more than 2 cups, my Mel, my partner, is like, ooh, more than two. That's your third cup. And I'm like, so. And now that I've got this study, I can say I can have between 4 and 6 cups and I won't get any older. So, and that's a bit of a piss take on this, but it's definitely some ammunition I can use to say that maybe I can have at least 4 cups of coffee a day and it might have benefits to me. So, look, it looked at what it was investigating was based on what previous research had investigated with individuals around does coffee consumption have health benefits, reduction of risk of chronic diseases and mortality. However, what hasn't been studied is its relationship to frailty in older adults. And that was unclear. So what this set out to do was look at adults aged 55 years or above, and it was using what's called LASA, which is the Longitudinal Aging Study in Amsterdam. And so it was 11, let's call it 1,100 adults that were used. And LASA is a large ongoing cohort study designed to investigate the physical, psychological, and social aspects of aging in a large representative sample of older adults in the Netherlands. So it does take into account males, females, but it is obviously based in Europe. So whether you want to think that applies to you or not, I think it does. It's certainly in a, let's call it a first world country. They looked at coffee intake assessed through a questionnaire for current and midlife ages, so between 40 and 65. Participants were grouped by daily intake, and there was 5, no coffee, 0 to 2, 2 to 4, 4 to 6, or greater than 6 cups a day. And a cup was classified as 125 mils, so a bit bigger than an espresso, I guess. The frailty status was assessed using what's called a Freed's five-component frailty phenotype. And if you had three or more of these things happening to you or objective markers, then you were classified as getting, more frail. So it was weight loss, 5% or more, weakness with grip strength, exhaustion through a questionnaire rated around like depressive episodes, slow gait speed, and low physical activity, which I thought was all pretty good markers and probably good indication of what could happen. So the key results from this study were that effectively drinking more than 4 cups a day were linked to lower odds of developing 3 or more of those characteristics that sort of are linked to frailty. And that was compared to 0 to 2 cups. So there was significant difference drinking 4 or more cups to 0 to 2, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah, I think so too, especially because they didn't compare it just to non-coffee drinkers. They compared it to people drinking what I would say a moderate coffee consumption, 0 to 2 coffee cups per day versus abstainers. Because people who don't drink coffee, there's always that like, what's special about them? Like people usually who don't drink coffee do it for a certain reason. There's not very many people who don't drink coffee. So, yeah, but pretty big odds ratios here. I mean, 0.36 and 0.37. So, 63, 64% lower odds of developing frailty with the 4 to 6 and greater than 6 cups per day, which is really interesting. I think what the question here always comes down to, why? What like mechanisms could explain this? And I think sometimes you can get too deep into the biology and make all these weird, oh, well, coffee does this and it affects these genes or something like that. But for me, honestly, the one of the most compelling things about coffee and why it might explain some of these health benefits. And I just a few months ago, I was actually we did a deep dive into coffee. Rhonda, Patrick, and I did a deep dive into coffee for longevity and health span, and we were looking into all this research. And one of the, I think, most compelling hypotheses is that just drinking more coffee might make you more physically active because it's a stimulant.
100%.
You have more
100%.
brain energy. So if you're having 4 to 6 cups of coffee per day, maybe you're more motivated to exercise, you're more physically active throughout the day. Boom, that explains the frailty, it explains the cardiovascular disease, it explains a lot of these health benefits. So we don't have to say, oh, it's some magical polyphenols in coffee. I think those contribute a little bit to it, but I think it's really just the physical activity piece is, yeah, if I drink coffee, I'm going to be more physically active during the day. And so older adults who drink more coffee are probably staying more active. And that's like one of the main explanations, especially when it comes to something like frailty, which is physical, activity related.
I couldn't agree more. I think sometimes we can get a little bit bogged down. Like, there were things in the author's discussion. You mentioned antioxidants,
Yeah,
polyphenols. Yeah, great. I mean, the amount in there is, yes, okay, if you drink 6 cups a day, maybe the
right.
amount is meaningful. But, really, sarcopenia, they mentioned, but it's all mice studies. It's like, what does caffeine do in mice, to prevent loss of muscle mass as we age? I don't think it's that. However, the sarcopenia might be impacted if you've had a hell of a lot of coffee and you go out and you're actually exercising, and then you might go to the gym or go for a walk. Okay, that might offset the loss of muscle mass because you're just more active, as you say. Insulin sensitivity, does it, is the drive for carbohydrates and storage in muscle, between muscle fibers, is that improved with coffee? Yes. Does that have a significant impact? Is it something that we'd rely on to say that's why it reduces frailty? I just can't wrap my head around that. It might play a piece in the puzzle, but I think what you said, it just gives you a buzz. It
Yep.
makes you feel bloody good, and you get up and you get moving. And I think you've only, again, I'll go back to Jan and the discussions that we've had around coffee, and he's like, don't try and take coffee away from me. I don't care if it impacts jet lag or sleep or anything. He's like, if I don't have it, I'm terrible. And
I don't really think, and after doing this whole deep dive into coffee, I mean, I was reading just the literature on every health outcome. There doesn't seem to be anything that coffee is associated with in a negative way. Of course, there are people who respond adversely to coffee. You're very sensitive, and if you drink it too close to sleep, you might not sleep well. But there's just, I mean, if you look at cognitive health, if you look at cardiovascular health, if you look at diabetes risk,
Bowel
anything,
cancer. And
2 to 5 cups of coffee per day is associated with positive health outcomes. And I know a lot of that's association, but one of the interesting things about coffee is there's a lot of mechanistic research on it too. It improves endothelial function. It does, increase fat burning to some extent, insulin sensitivity. So there are these mechanisms, and I mean, it does have polyphenols. It's a huge source of antioxidants. I mean, it's a health beverage, and I know that might seem like a big exaggeration, but I really think it is. There's no reason not to drink coffee unless you respond very adversely to it. That's my hot take, I think, of the day. So nobody
no
needs to
good.
give it up if you.
No, no, I think it's perfect, and I think your takeaway is bang on. I am one of those people sensitive to coffee. If I
Mhm.
get over 4 cups, I go very jittery and anxious. It also massively impacts my sleep. So the key takeaway for me or anyone, if you do want to have 4 cups of coffee, just get it in before 12 o'clock. It's perfect. You can have one an hour. It's
Yeah, yeah.
wonderful.
Well, there was an interesting study that we included, and we had posted about and did a newsletter about. They looked at not only coffee consumption, but the time of day of coffee consumption in relation to all-cause mortality. And it was basically only the morning coffee drinkers had a reduction in their all-cause mortality. If people were drinking it all day long, that mortality benefit disappeared. So it was, 2 to 4 cups of coffee as long as you drink it. Maybe it was before 10 a.m. or something like that. That reduced all-cause mortality. But then if you categorized yourself as all day, maybe it was 12, maybe it was noon, something like that in the a.m. If you drank 2 to 4 cups, but you were an all day drinker, drinking it all day, then there was no mortality benefit. So it might depend on when you drink it. Again, if it impacts your sleep negatively, we know sleep is like one of the most important things for your long term health. So certainly drink it at a certain time of day. Do you know what kind of metabolizer you are? Do you know, have you done the genotyping?
I'm the slow. I can't remember
Okay,
the exact.
which makes
Was
sense
it
then. I mean,
CY1P or whatever it is?
yeah, which makes sense kind of then given how you like respond. Because I am a fast metabolizer of coffee and I can drink. I mean, I'm one of those who's like, I can drink an espresso before bed and just go to sleep. Of course, maybe it's impacting my sleep physiology in some way, but I mean, I'm drinking a cup of coffee right now as we speak. It's 5 p.m. and I'll sleep fine just tonight.
Mate, I could not even. I mean, people tell me that, and I cannot fathom it. I am like, oh my god. And to be fair, I will blanket statement for fuel in users. I literally say, regardless of whatever phenotype you are, I love that you're just sucking back at the
Hmm.
coffee. Um, Whatever phenotype you are, based on this, I still say try and get your last coffee in before 12.
I would
Because
agree.
I do think it has, even though you might metabolize it, you might feel fine, I still feel it has an impact on the sleep metrics. So
I
that's our
think it
take, and
does, and
that's where
there's
we
and there's
stand.
no way to know unless you go get a electrophysiology or a polysomnogram. So
Somnogram.
I'm not going to drink it all night, right before bed on purpose. But if I happen to, I typically don't find that it improves my sleep. I'm too tired at the end of the day anyway. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so that's getting old and drinking 4 cups of coffee or more. Hopefully, keeps us young, and maybe we don't need to worry about all the other longevity hacks that people are throwing out there.
Yeah, coffee might be
It's
the simplest one.
yeah, it's a hell of a lot cheaper as well. Um,
Yeah.
so let's shift on to caffeine and performance then. So we had a study which is titled. Let me just pull it up. What is the study? You can read it
Yeah, I
out.
got it
This
up
one's
if you want
yours.
me to
Yeah,
talk
you go
about it.
for it.
Yeah. The study, a long title, which was weird, but it's kind of a mouthful. Caffeine enhances performance regardless of fueling strategy. However, high carbohydrate availability is associated with improved training speeds compared with ketogenic diet. So, this one was published by Louise Burke. Most people are pretty well aware of her in the sports nutrition space. Awesome research. I love every time her group comes out with a study.
Good,
And
good, good Aussie group, mate. Good
yeah,
Aussie.
definitely,
There we go.
definitely. And she's a kick-ass runner too. I mean, I think she's almost a sub 3 hour marathoner, close to 3 hours. So,
And you
so
say, and people might say, "Oh, that's not that good." I think Louise must be. Ooh,
I
I
mean, I
don't want to
think, yeah,
estimate
I
her
don't want
age,
to
but
either. Let's
I
not
know
go
I
down
don't want
this
to.
dangerous.
She's older than me, and she's running
I
probably
think she's in
faster
her
than me. So
50s at
yeah,
least. I think she's
50s,
in.
maybe early
Apologies, Luis,
60s.
if we, yeah.
Yeah, don't shoot us, Louise. But we love your research, and we love what you're doing with
Yeah.
your research.
So what the purpose of the study was, they've published maybe up to a dozen studies at this point comparing high carb diet to ketogenic diets on performance. Pretty well established, at least by their group, that ketogenic diets reduce performance compared to a high carb diet. And they're specifically looking at, elite performers. So they study these groups of race walkers or elite runners. So they're not just looking at your everyday folks, they're studying these high level athletes. So they wanted to, in this study, confirm that reduced training metrics that previously occur with a ketogenic low carb, high fat diet compared to a high carb diet. And then additionally, and that was the novel aspect of the study, they added caffeine. So they actually were wondering, could caffeine sort of rescue these performance decrements that come from athletes consuming a low carb ketogenic diet? So they took a group of elite runners, they did a 3-week altitude training camp, and one group consumed a low carb ketogenic diet. They were consuming, I think, 0.5 grams of carbs per kilogram per day. So I mean that's less than 50 grams. Truly ketogenic, not just
Yeah, they
not just
went
low
they went
carb.
50 grams.
Yeah,
Just
50
they did
grams.
go
And then
50
the high
grams.
carb group was 8 grams per kilogram of carbs per day. And then during
Which I just
weeks,
want to add,
yeah, go
and what
ahead.
I loved about that is, I mean, they're the definitions we would use as well within fueling.
Mm-hmm.
So the high carb, the carb load would be 8 grams or more. That resonated with me, and it's nice to see. Again, what we're doing in practice is actually lining up with the research, and then hopefully showing similar results, and it's
Well,
cool.
and it's nice to see researchers kind of sticking to what the definitions across sports
Correct,
nutrition would be in terms of high carb and ketogenic versus some arbitrary,
mate. There's
it's
nothing
high carb, but they're
worse.
not actually eating high carbs, or it's low carb and they're eating a couple
Yeah,
hundred grams per day. I mean,
and they also match protein in this,
yes,
so
match
which I thought
protein,
was
match
really good
energy intake.
because one of the biggest complaints often with the high carb is that they then drop the protein right down, and then you've got someone on a high protein, high fat, but low protein, high carb, and could that have an impact? So it's cool to see that they match, and it seems to be happening more often now. The matching of protein between the two diet types.
Yeah, that's how it's kind of an indicator of a higher quality
Yeah,
study, a group that knows what they're doing.
yeah.
So they did this altitude training camp, 3 weeks, and then on weeks 2 and 3, they performed a 3 kilometer time trial. And
Did you?
on,
Sorry, Brady. Did you mention that they are walkers though? Did you mention
I
that?
think this group was runners. I don't think they actually did race walkers.
No, these were race walkers as well.
They were okay. My
Yep.
mistake. Yeah, I
Yeah,
for some
yeah.
reason I thought this was a group of runners that they isolated, but they used the group of race walkers that traditionally they use. Oh, yep, elite
And
race walkers.
because
Okay, I see.
I think that's so they've done a previous study called the Supernova study, which was when they looked at the keto and high carb and they showed the differences. And a lot of people complain saying, "Oh, they're race walkers," but
Hmm.
and yes, you could say, okay, this population are elite race walkers. Is it applicable to them? They're very elite and they still move bloody quick.
I mean, they're
If you've ever
walking
seen it.
faster than most people can run.
Correct. So I think if you're going to take the speed at which they're doing, I mean, a 14, what was it? I think the distance was 14 kilometers, was it? But they are
Hmm.
moving incredibly quickly over that distance. So I think for okay, it may not be comparable to like the elite pro, like marathoners, triathletes, that sort of thing. But for majority of individuals, the pace that they're moving at is probably faster than most people will run.
Absolutely, it's still a high output sport.
Yeah. Okay. So I
Yeah.
just wanted to clarify that just so
No,
people
thank
know.
you for doing that because I incorrectly said that they were runners. So thank you for that correction.
That's cool.
And yeah, so they were taking part of this altitude training camp, and then after week 2, and then after week 3, they performed a 3 kilometer or a 14 kilometer hill session. So this was kind of a race simulation type of thing. And one of those weeks, so they either received caffeinated gum before the 14K hill session or a placebo in randomized crossover order. And what we would expect, the ketogenic group they saw the decline in performance compared to the high carb group. In fact, they didn't even improve their time compared to the baseline trial, whereas the high carb group did. And then what was interesting, when you give them caffeine,
Can I
yeah,
ask a question? I love that you say it's what we'd expect. However, like there's probably a lot of people out there going, "Oh, we wouldn't expect that. We'd expect keto to get better."
well, if you're
I'm
aware
just
of
laughing. I'm just
yeah, if you're
laughing
aware of any
because
of the studies published by this group, it is what you would pretty much expect.
yeah, yeah. So I'm just laughing because a lot of people will, we certainly see a lot of comments on Instagram and social media going, high carb is definitely not the way to get faster. It's keto, it's high fat. And I'm like, I don't know. Have you read any of the research?
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, the pretty consistent finding here is that basically it just requires them to, they're using more oxygen when they're exercising at the same intensity because yeah, they're burning a lot of fat. They increase fat burning when they're on a keto diet. Well, that's great, but that impairs your glycolytic capacity and you're exercising. You can't just exercise that at the same high intensity, percent of your speed at your VO2 max.
Correct. But, hey, you a better fat burner. So, that's awesome.
Yeah, right. No, they don't give medals to the best fat burner. That quote isn't attributed to me. I forget who said that,
Someone,
but
I do love that quote, and I've heard it
yeah.
many times. I'm always like, exactly, because everyone's so obsessed with like fat max, and I get it from a metabolic standpoint. If you're metabolically compromised, I
Mhm.
get it, but like the speeds at which everyone's now finishing, it's like, is it really that important? Like, in the the bigger scheme of things for these elite and certainly very fast athletes, is it making a huge difference? And I'd probably also argue when you actually look at those elites, their fat oxidation is already excellent. So
It's high even if they're not eating a ketogenic diet.
correct.
Yeah.
So
That's what I never really understood. And yeah, I mean, it's all about being metabolically flexible, not necessarily being the best fat burner. And, I used to think there used to be this whole hypothesis on keto and things that even in ultra endurance, if you're better at fat burning, you're going to spare your glycogen so you can perform better. It doesn't even seem to matter now because they're fueling with 100, 120 grams of carbs per hour. It doesn't matter if you're sparing muscle glycogen because you're fueling the entire time. And it just doesn't seem relevant. Like you said, if you're a lead athlete, if you're on a general population, yeah, you be the best fat burner you can be. That probably has some health benefits, but regardless of what athletes are eating, they're incredibly good. They're going to be good at fat burners for the
yeah,
most part.
yeah, no, I agree. Sorry, I
For the
digress.
most part, no, I like the
Keep going, keep
interjections.
going.
I think it's adding some good context. So as I was mentioning, the keto group they didn't improve their 14K hill session. The high carb group did. It's important because they were training, so you'd expect training would improve your performance on that, but they didn't if they were on the keto diet. So when they gave them caffeine, what they saw was that both groups improved their performance during the time trial, but it was basically the same gap between the keto and the high carb group. So the high carb group improved their performance. I think it was by about 4%, and the keto diet improved their performance during the 14K time trial about 4%. But keto diet was still lower. They were still slower than the high carb group. So it didn't rescue the detriments of the ketogenic diet. It didn't make them equal to high carb, but it made them better than their keto selves. So caffeine still works if you're on keto, but you're still going to be slower than if you were keto and low carb or keto and high carb or just probably high carb without caffeine. Mic drop.
Yes, yeah, yeah, exactly. You said it all. So
Well, and I
yeah,
think
look, that's cool.
the most important thing I think I said there, the most important result is that if you looked at the keto plus caffeine, they still perform worse than carbs without caffeine. So,
So yeah,
that
even
alone,
even if you layer in
there's
caffeine
kind of a
on top of a
hierarchy,
poor diet, like
right?
yeah, you're still slower than just the carbs
Yeah. So there's
alone.
a hierarchy there. You get high carb plus caffeine, then you get high carb, no caffeine, then you get keto with caffeine, and then you get keto way at the bottom.
Yeah. So if you're going to go keto, at least take on some
At
caffeine to
least
try
use
and
caffeine. Maybe you need
yeah.
6 milligrams per kilogram or something
I
like
was going to
that.
say, I guess then the next arm of this study, maybe they bump up the milligrams. Maybe they give the ketogenic group 6 milligrams per kilo and keep the carb on 3 milligrams, and then just adjust that and see
That would
if it gives them
actually
a big
that'd be an
buzz.
interesting study. Yeah, double the caffeine dose for the keto and see if it helps. That'd be an interesting study. So maybe they'll do that one next and see. 6 milligram per kilogram is quite the dose of caffeine, but That
for a
would be like
short period of
500 to
time.
600 milligrams, probably about.
Yeah, it's certainly. Oh, look, I mean, again, I'm a fan of caffeine during exercise, and just certainly taking, even 6, 7, 8 milligrams per kilo over an extended period of time.
Mhm.
Like we're talking 70.3 or Ironman sort of duration. You're talking, somewhere between 4 and I guess up to 12 hours. You can certainly extend that dosage, but yeah, 5 or 6 milligrams in a very short period of time might be pretty punchy. So
Well, with the gum too, because there's the buccal absorption. So if I'm sipping a cup of coffee, I'm gradually sort of ingesting the caffeine. With the gum. It's like you chew it, boom, it's in your system right away. So you're getting that right away, that absorption.
actually, that's a good point because that is something they did use a gum and they took it 20 minutes before the
Mhm.
exercise. And that is, as you said, the rate of absorption and utilization of caffeine is much quicker through gum than, say, pill or ingestion in a caffeine gel source or carb source. So it's something I thought that's quite cool as well. Like, a lot of athletes probably rely on caffeinated gels or carb drinks or pills. If you really want a quick hit and you're really struggling, then yes, caffeinated gum. I think they use military gum. It's called high energy military gum, I think is the brand. I mean, it is powerful. And I get asked this question a lot. Like, so rugby players, you'll see them chewing on the field all the
Mhm.
time. And everyone's like, why the hell are they chewing gum? And it's like, it's caffeine gum.
It's caffeine gum. Interesting.
And they have all sorts of problems that evening trying to get to sleep after a
Oh,
game.
I
They
bet combining that
munching back on.
caffeine. Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, you put down 3 or 4 pieces of those easily, probably. Don't know how
exactly.
much
So
caffeine you're getting combined with the stimulation of the
yeah,
game. Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, look, I thought it was a really cool study. So takeaway, yep, we've done takeaways. Look, end of the day, yeah, if you go keto, just don't expect to go quite as fast as your carved up counterpart that's hopefully using fuel in. So, um, mate, the last study, and I know we're very close to time. I thought this was a really good one for athletes going into the off season because this was really about a comparison of concurrent resistance, or aerobic training on body fat loss, a systematic review and meta-analysis. It is located in the Journal of International Society of Sports Nutrition. The lead author was Lafontant. I'm probably absolutely butchering that name, et al. So a lot of authors in this, and I thought it was an interesting study. Look, did you have an opportunity to really get through it, or otherwise I can
Yeah,
lead
I
us into it?
scanned it a bit, but if you wanna maybe take
Yeah,
take the lead on this one.
I will indeed. So it looked at 36 RCTs, randomized controlled studies between 1980 and 2023, with around 1,550 healthy adults. They looked at people doing resistance training, aerobic training, or what we call concurrent training, so combining aerobic training with resistance training over a period, ideally either under or over 10 weeks. And what they were looking at also, they did some sub-analyses there and examined things like program duration, concurrent training timing, so whether it was same day or different day sessions when doing aerobic training and weights training. And they came to some pretty cool conclusions. Do you include weights training in your training for marathon, or are you purely aerobic?
I do weights training. It's probably not adequate. It's more, body weight type stuff around the house, push-ups, pull-ups for arms, things like that. So it could be a more regimented strength training
Yeah.
program, but there's some stuff in there.
I guess the other thing is you're probably not focused on fat loss. And that's probably one of the
Correct.
key
Not
the
at
key
all. Yeah.
takeaways for those individuals as we go into off season. We know, just looking at the data in Fuel In, is that a very high percentage, we're talking 90% of users, will have a fat loss goal on their program. So I think if you are going into the off season and you're thinking about losing weight, then these results could be applicable to you. So I will quote directly from the study. While there are no differences in percentage of body fat loss between exercise modes, i.e., aerobic training or concurrent training, sorry, I will rephrase that. While there are no differences in percent of body fat loss between exercise modes, aerobic training and concurrent training are more effective than resistance training alone in reducing absolute fat mass. However, resistance training neither improved nor impeded fat mass loss when incorporated into concurrent training. So there's a bit to get your head around there. Effectively, what it's saying is that you either do, if you want to lose fat mass, do aerobic training or a combination of aerobic with resistance training, because that is more effective than resistance training alone in reducing body fat. Now, it's really interesting, just anecdotally speaking, I used to always be a believer and tell people, nah, you can just do weights and you'll improve your body comp. Having gotten into the endurance world over the last 7 years, hand on heart, this study supports my anecdotal experience. You start exercising aerobically, biking, running, swimming, you do that in combination with weights or even without weights, you start to shed body fat if your nutrition is in line with obviously being in a calorie deficit. So I definitely subscribe to what this found from an anecdotal experience. I thought what was really interesting, though, that resistance training neither improved nor impeded fat mass loss when incorporated into concurrent training. So what that means is whether you have the strength training involved or not, it won't impact it in a negative way, but it won't necessarily impact it in a positive way. However, the big takeaway for me there is strength training has a lot of other benefits outside of just reducing fat mass. And so for an athlete, you may have a potential bone stress injury. Is lifting weights beneficial for bone density? Yes, we know that. Mm-hmm. So that would be one reason why I'd be considering it. From a proprioceptive perspective and potentially a plyometric perspective, potentially from injury data analysis, where we say, and we look at injury surveillance, we know that those individuals who lift weights have a lower incidence of overuse injuries. So again, layering it in, does this mean you shouldn't lift weights because you can lose fat just by doing aerobic training? No, it doesn't mean that. It means weights will still allow you to lose it in conjunction with the aerobic training, but also will have a lot of other benefits outside purely of weight loss or fat loss. And that was really my big takeaway from this.
Yeah, I mean, I think I share the same takeaway as well. I think with athletes, sometimes you'll see a study and say, oh, well, if aerobic is just as beneficial, what's the point of adding strength training? Maybe it doesn't prevent injury, or it doesn't help me improve my body composition more, or, it's not going to increase my muscle mass. Well, yes, but like you said, several other benefits that might not just be directly related to, body composition. It's proprioception, it's bone density, just, keeping you, in some instances, it's definitely going to keep you injury free just because you're going to be stronger and more robust and resilient against injury. I think it does add to sort of this conversation on the, what's better for fat loss, resistance training or cardio. There's always this debate among, the fitness and health space on social media. I think that there's no doubt. And like you said, you need cardio, you need aerobic training. If you want to improve your body composition, it seems necessary. And I wonder if it's from why it might not necessarily be because cardio, quote unquote, burns fat. Because when it all comes down to it, if you're exercising faster, if you're doing cardio and burning more fat, that might actually not lead to fat loss, but it does burn calories. So if you're burning an extra 500 to 600 calories a day through exercise, that's going to contribute to body composition. And when it comes down to it, resistance training just doesn't burn that many calories. Even if you're building muscle, people like to cite the fact
that,
yeah, well, EPOC, and if you put on more muscle, then your basal metabolic rate increases. The difference, it's like 10 calories per day if you build a couple kilograms of lean mass. It's nothing. It's nothing.
And it's great you say that, because we always get asked, why don't you include fat-free mass or percentage of body fat in your calculation or in the background sort of settings? And it's like, because it doesn't mean anything.
Mm-hmm.
Like whether you're absolutely jacked and you're 9% body fat versus someone who's 20% body fat, the actual caloric difference in terms of resting metabolic rate it's minimal. So get over it. Like, sorry, but okay, you look better, but your basal metabolic rate is not really that different from someone who's a lot fatter than you.
Right, right, totally. And yeah, they'll say, oh, it's much, if just adding a couple pounds or kilograms of muscle, I'd rather do that than, spend an hour a day on aerobic training. Well, an hour a day on aerobic training that where you're going to burn 600 calories or something is maybe not six, but 400 to 600. How much time investment does it take to build a couple kilograms of truly lean mass? A lot of
And
dedication, a lot of
minimum of
weightlifting.
8 weeks, minimum of eight
Yes,
weeks. And that's what
right.
people are like, oh, I'm getting stronger. I must be getting bigger. And it's like, no, your
It's
neurological
an
system is just getting more efficient.
Exactly.
And,
Yeah, you don't see
and
muscle
you
building until about couple months, 6, 8 weeks.
yeah, yeah. So, and I think your point being there, the reason, and this wasn't covered in this, is the reason that I believe the aerobic training in combination with the strength training has, well, definitely the aerobic training with or without the strength training thrown in, has the biggest impact on fat loss is because of the caloric expenditure.
Hmm.
And the thing that people need to recognize with this, it doesn't matter how much aerobic training you're doing. If that aerobic training is creating a caloric burn, but your dietary intake is still in a caloric surplus, you're not going to lose fat. So the thing that really drives fat loss or body weight loss is your nutrition, having that set correctly so you are in a calorie deficit in relation to your exercise, and the aerobic component of that exercise can potentially drive the energy expenditure up more than the resistance training, and hence you will probably get a better result if you control your nutrition.
Absolutely. I think nutrition, when it comes to body composition, nutrition is the most important thing.
And I was just watching, and this episode probably won't be released immediately, but Peter Attia had, like, he just posted it yesterday, and I'll probably find the post and reshare it in the notes or something. We can reshare it online. But it was literally, I think he had like four experts, and they were like,
Hmm.
talking about, like, in your experience, do people associate resistance training or training with improvement in body composition? They're all like, absolutely. And he's like, but is that wrong? And they all said, absolutely. The old saying, abs are made in the kitchen.
Right.
Like, but no one associates that for some reason. People are like, oh, you must be training the house down. The point being, you could train 4 or 5 hours a week, less than an hour a day, but have your nutrition really, really dialed in. You will see those improvements in body composition, as opposed to someone who's doing 12, 15 hours a day and their nutrition sucks. They're probably not getting any of those results. And I myself personally see that a lot with people complaining, I just don't achieve body composition changes despite all the training I'm doing.
Yep. Totally agree.
So anyway, that's the rant. Cool, mate. Look, I know we're up on the hour. We covered, I won't swear, but we covered a ton
We did.
of cool studies, some great takeaways. Hopefully everyone got a lot out of this. Mate, if you want to sign off, if you've got anything else to add, please say so now.
No, nothing to add. I think we have some good, we have about the same amount of studies for our next episode that we didn't get to today. So I'm excited to cover those. I'm sure we'll add several more to our list. There's something coming out every day. But if people enjoy the studies that we chatted about, I'm writing about similar stuff over on my Substack. If you want to go to physiologicallyspeaking.com, sign up for my weekly newsletter. It's free to sign up for. And so I'm covering stuff related to health, nutrition, longevity, and Run Long, Run Healthy newsletter as well. That's also on Substack. That's more for if you're a runner or an endurance athlete. I'm covering mostly endurance athlete related studies and kind of more digestible, quick little summaries every week. So that's where people can find me. Also on X, Brady_H is my handle there. So go over there, say hey. Not really active on Instagram, so just X. That's my preferred platform. And say hey on there, give me a follow, and feel free to reach out, ask a question if you want.
I love that, Brady. And your newsletter is great. I've plugged it in our newsletter before. I think it's a really useful piece, and I would definitely encourage anyone who's interested in research and getting some good takeaways to subscribe to Brady's Substack. So, mate,
Thanks. Appreciate that, Scott. Thanks again
that's
for
all
having
right.
me on. It was fun.
Yeah, as always, mate. Great show, and I'll catch up with you soon.
Sounds good. Till next time.
See you, mate.